Hey guys, it's Danny. Today is a big day as I shall be attempting to repot my Zygopetalum orchid. Well, one of them. I recently made a test order at Ikson Orchids in the Netherlands. If you missed that video, check it down below. Anyway, I got myself two Zygopetalums. One of them is just done blooming and it's the perfect time to repot it actually because the new growth is just maturing. Now, if you're not very acquainted with my channel, well, you should know something about me. I have lost a lot of Zygopetalums in my life. I consider them to be quite a special orchid in the sense that they're not very forgiving, they have some special needs, and it might take a bit of trial and error if you don't have the perfect environment for them or if you just don't get it right the first time. I didn't get it right for about 6 times. But hey, you know what? Each experience has taught me something. I'm not the type that gives up, and today we shall start by repotting. So with that said, let's get to the repotting table. So here's my little Zygopetalum. I think he's the greatest subject to do this video with, and today we're gonna use this orchid as a sort of example for any type of orchid you might actually need to repot and you don't have a video on, you don't have information on. What should you do? Easy. It all starts with the label. So on the label we can see that my orchid is actually a hybrid. It is a complex hybrid between a Zygopetalum hybrid and I presume a Zygopetalum type species. So at this point we need to do some investigation. Google to the rescue. So one of the websites that I really liked lately, I told you about it, is the Blue Nanta website, which gives you a lot of details about hybrids. So at a simple Google search with the keyword Blue Nanta, we run into a pickle because we don't seem to have a lot of information on this orchid. There is no data. It's okay. If we cannot find something on Blue Nanta, we can definitely find it on the RHS website, which I'll link you to down below. On a search on the RHS website, yet again, I cannot find any type of data. So either we are working with a very new hybrid, definitely not a registered hybrid here, so we cannot say much about its parentage. This is the first time this happens to me. That's why I'm saying it is a good example to work with. Typically, if you look for a hybrid, you will find the parentage either through these two websites or other sources on Google. All you need to do is actually Google. But now, what do we do with this guy? Because we have no idea what the first hybrid and its parentage actually is. Well, we just need to do some more detective work. First of all, do we notice the first name is Zygopetalum here? It's not Zygonesia, Zygostati, or whatever other intergeneric hybrids zygos might have. Well, this means that this is not an intergeneric hybrid. It's a Zygopetalum, which narrows down a little bit the list of possible parents. So with Zygopetalums, we're a little bit lucky because there aren't all that many species. Let's just think about the Cattleyas. It would be a nightmare to try to find the parents of a hybrid without having much leads, but with Zygopetalums, it's actually quite easy because there are a few orchid species which are highly used in hybridization. At this point, I will combine everything with a little bit of knowledge that I have. One of the most used orchid species when it comes to zygos is the Makai. And if we look on the orchid species website, we will learn a lot about it, including the fact that it is a terrestrial. Then another very used species is the Crinitum. And if we look on the website, we can see that this can be either a epiphyte or a terrestrial, depending on the exact location and elevation you find it in. Another popular zygo is the Maxillare. If we look again on the website, we can see that this one is an epiphyte. I think there is just another species which is typically used, but these are definitely the most popular species. So as you can see, we do have a little blend here of epiphytic or epiphytic plus terrestrial or straight terrestrial orchids here. So making a sort of average of everything we just read and looking at the orchid, noticing we have no aerial roots, certainly nothing like a Phalaenopsis or a Cattleya, we can deduct that this orchid inherited some traits that might definitely belong to some terrestrials, and even if it does have epiphytic traits, it certainly does not like to produce aerial roots. What other orchid doesn't really grow its roots in the air? The Paphniopetalum, which again is not always a terrestrial. It can be a lithophyte, even an epiphyte. But the thing is, this term only means it doesn't really grow in soil. I personally like to call Paphniopetalums semi-terrestrials because they don't really grow on trees, but they don't really grow in soil necessarily either. They tend to grow in debris, on rocks covered with mosses and so on and so forth. And judging by their behavior and the roots behavior, which I find many similarities with the Zygopetalums, I shall conclude that this orchid is potentially a semi-terrestrial hybrid. However, we do have another name on this little tag here. We have a Paradisanthus micranthus. Let's check that up on orchid species because it's a species. And here we find that this is a hot, yes, to cool growing terrestrial. So there we have it. We have a potentially semi-terrestrial orchid crossed with a terrestrial orchid. What do we get? A potentially semi-terrestrial with great terrestrial inclinations. So what do we pot it in? Well, certainly not something very, very airy, such as semi-hydro. Therefore, for today's orchid, we shall use something that is still loose and free draining, but also pretty water retentive, something that will not dry out super fast in my environment, something that will act pretty much like loose debris, mosses, things of the sorts. And for today, I shall actually make up my own mix, just to have this experience on video as well. Alright, so here we have the ingredients we're going to be working with today. First of all, Orchiata bark. This is the 912mm version. This is pine bark, but it is processed in a way to be long-lasting, be more pH stable, and overall be a more long-lasting and safer medium for orchids. And I have to say it is. I like Orchiata, I like kiwi bark, amongst all the other types of barks. Also, we are going to be using sphagnum moss. This is the best grow sphagnum moss, which I believe is the same brand which produces the Orchiata bark as well. And there we have some leca. I like to use the brand Pocon. I find it locally here, but pretty much any type of brand should be okay, because we're not gonna use this as a sole medium, but more like a filler and a sort of aeration medium. We're not gonna use a whole lot of it. And pretty much we are going to do a mixture of everything. So in the end, what I want to obtain is a airy and draining medium, but also one that retains quite a bit of water. I have to keep in mind my environment here and the fact that this orchid really doesn't like to be dry for long. So with that said, let's just prepare the medium. Okay, so like with any repotting, first I'm going to remove the stakes and then I will squeeze gently on the pot. Try to find a pseudobulb. I will not pull on the new growth because this orchid is rather fragile. Zygopetalums have pretty fragile leaves, so I will grab this pseudobulb and pull up. And hey, what do you know? It does not look bad. And the medium it was in looks pretty similar to what I just did, kinda, in the sense that it is pretty water retentive, but we also have quite a few bark pieces here. This is cocoa coir or cocoa husk. And even though it is water retentive, it's also pretty airy. And thankfully for us, easy to remove because the roots of a zygopetalum are extremely brittle. One thing I forgot to mention is that I did water this orchid, so this medium is soaked, it's not dry. This typically makes the roots a little bit more flexible, the medium a little bit more easy to remove. It's not gonna do wonders, but it is advisable to pre-soak medium when you unpot orchids. So I will go ahead and take my time in removing all of this. All right, so I will do this off camera because I need to be closer to the orchid and try not to damage any roots. This medium seems to come off really easy. I just need to be careful with it. So I'm not gonna bore you with it. I'll come back when I'm done. Alright, so I washed the root system of my orchid, removed all of the medium that I could. I didn't do an impressive job at it because these roots are really fragile and I don't want to mess them up. I did spray the root system with hydrogen peroxide 3% because I did find snails. And now it is time to pot. I wanted initially to pot this orchid in this 4-inch Repot Me pot, but I think it's a little too tiny. The orchid fits in it, but it's not necessarily going to allow another year or two worth of growth. Therefore, I'm gonna go with a sort of 13cm pot, which is not a pot, it's a container, but I think it will do okay. One thing I forgot to mention is that on the AOS website, they say that adding dolomitic lime will actually help zygopetalums create more robust, less flimsy leaves and growths. So I don't have dolomitic lime, but I have the next best thing. This is a Repot Me product. Now it is oyster shells, but take a look at this. I don't think these are shells. I think this is lime. This is an older product, I think. Jessica actually sent me this one. I think they improved it a little bit in recent times, but it's okay. I am going to sprinkle a little bit of this as well. considering I am using my reverse osmosis water, I am not in danger of actually adding too much calcium to my orchid. I can actually control the amount of calcium and magnesium through the use of my fertilizer. So a few sprinkles of this I think should not harm anything. I'll just have to be careful. So with that said, let's just start with potting the orchid. Like with any orchid, I'm gonna be putting some medium on the bottom of the pot. And yes, I need to prepare myself a little bit more. I was not expecting this orchid to actually have such a good root system. Let's see. So what I want to do with the Zygopetalum is actually make sure that all of the roots are inside the medium. So not potted like this, because there's a very high chance these roots will stop growing in the air. So I want everything to be covered with medium. I'm not gonna bury the orchid. I'm just going to maintain the level it was potted at. So with that said, let's just start to put medium around the root system, and I will at some point prepare more medium. And here is my orchid potted. The last thing that I will do is just cut the flower spike. It will not branch out or anything of the sort, so I'll go close to the base and give it a good snip. And there we have it. So a few more things before we end this video. When you're working with orchiata bark or kiwi bark, whether it's in the proper orchiata bag or it comes in a mix like the Repot mixes, be aware that this type of bark is water repellent, at least at first. I actually saw a comment on Amazon saying it's the worst bark they've ever used. This product has 1 star on Amazon because somebody had no idea that orchiata and kiwi bark are water repellent at first. So when you work with this bark and you are not using sphagnum moss or other more water retentive materials together with it, you need to soak the orchid. It doesn't work if you just run water through the pot. Let me just show you. Do you see how the water just sits on top of this piece of bark and it's not soaked in? Well, this type of bark is not supposed to be water retentive at first, hence why it's so long lasting. So just be aware that it needs soaking. If you're using it with moss, there's no issue there, because the moss will retain water and you will have no issue with water retention. But anyway, that's about it. And regarding orchids you have no idea how to care for, Google really is your friend. Go to the source, go to the parents, the actual species, see how they grow in their natural habitat, look at the altitude, especially, not necessarily the geographical location, because orchids can come from very hot known places, but if they come from high altitudes, it doesn't really matter because those altitudes usually experience much lower temperatures. And the way they are described can always give you information on how you should care for them, what they prefer. Let's say they prefer to stay rather moist. Okay, how do you actually manage to keep them moist in your environment? Some people manage to keep orchids moist just with bark, while others need sphagnum moss. So take the vital information and apply it to your environment. And with that said, I think it's time to end. Thank you guys so much for watching. I shall keep you up to date. Links to products in the description, along with other stuff, as always. So you know the drill. Like or dislike this video below. Subscribe to my channel for regular orchid videos and turn on notifications just so you don't miss any of my videos. And if you really enjoyed this video and you want to support the channel, consider visiting our merch store. You'll find the link down below in the description. And with that said, I'll see you guys next time. Bye!